Hi everyone, I'm Sonakshi Gandhi. I'm a clinical psychologist at the Mind Garden. It seems like the mainstream idea about mental health is more biomedical and not psychosocial. There is growing research evidence to support the view that looking at mental health in just a symptom, disease, and treatment context rather than in a broader form, taking into account the environment, culture, and socio political scenario of individuals, is a problematic notion. Continuing our video series on conversations about mental health, we will be talking about a perspective that is embedded deeply into our socio-cultural setting: feminism and its association to mental health. To this effect, I have here with me a very special guest, Dr. Itisha Nagar. Itisha is an assistant professor of psychology at Kamla Nehru College, Delhi University. She is a passionate feminist and is well regarded by her students. I welcome you, Vitisha, and I thank you for agreeing to be a part of this.
Thank you.
For the benefit of those watching this, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, well, thank you for having me here for this session, first of all. Congratulations on this initiative, Sonakshi. We've known each other since our college days, and I'm so happy to see you making this effort in the area of mental health. Well, about me, I have been teaching for 6 years now at University of Delhi. My doctoral thesis work was in the area of autism. So naturally, I had a more neurocognition and autism. So I had a more biological approach to begin with respect to human condition. But my interaction with people with autism and their families made me realize that um, a large chunk of their disabilities actually and their well-being actually comes from the social conditions around them, especially apathy and stigma and social intolerance. So after that, I have been majorly involved with the social cultural context of mental health. In particular, my research work has been in the area of gender and mental health. So I've examined body image issues, skin color biases, and lately I have been working in towards examining Islamophobia and its link with fake news and social media. So that's about me.
All right. Itisha, many studies have shown that marginalized communities are generally more susceptible to mental health stressors.
Mm-hmm.
What is your view
Mm-hmm.
on that?
Okay, so if we talk about the link between marginalization and health, I think first we need to mental health. First, we need to examine the general link between marginalization and health. So, for many people out there, I think it would come as a surprise how one's status as a woman, as someone belonging to the marginalized section, like the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and even marginalized sexual identity can render an individual more vulnerable to diseases and disorder. To support, I'd like to share some statistics that the highest rates of infant mortality and malnutrition are amongst children belonging to Dalit classes, Dalit castes, and in fact, last year in Muzaffarpur, if you see, majority of children who died because of acute encephalitis syndrome were Dalit girls. At least 60-70% of them were Dalit girls. So, moreover, marginalized communities are less likely in our country to access determinants of health, such as clean drinking water, food, and they're likely to live in unhygienic, crowded spaces and have less access, little or in fact no access to healthcare services even till date. So unfortunately, this effect of marginalization on health hasn't been given much attention as much as it should have. Probably because of the capitalist healthcare system that we have that focuses mostly on profit and not on welfare. Now, if we come to mental health, I think there is a common misperception amongst the masses and probably even amongst some psychologists that problems, mental health disorders like depression and anxiety are a result of having too much extra time in your hand. So probably relegated more to the upper classes because I believe most people may have this conception that depression and anxiety doesn't have, people belonging to low socioeconomic classes do not have the luxury to be depressed or to be anxious. So, but of course, latest researches, as you pointed out, have found that there are plenty of studies that say that chronic and systemic exposure to violence, persecution, and discrimination is likely to make people, marginalized people, more prone to a variety of mental disorders ranging from low self-esteem to anxiety and to depression. So, for example, a research by American Psychological Association found that members belonging to the LGBT community are likely to experience high rates of stressors compared to other individuals. And these studies have been replicated for people, groups belonging to, racial marginalization, experiencing groups that experience racial marginalization. Closer home, caste-based discrimination has been associated with social isolation, depression, and loss of self-esteem.
Mhm.
I mean, if we examine the anecdotal evidences that we've gathered over the last 2 months, you find that many Muslim people in our country have been experiencing heightened state of anxiety given the rise of global Islamophobia, actually. And then Kashmir, that has been historically, there have been widespread reports of prevalence of mental health issues. These cases, doctors and psychiatrists and mental health practitioners suggest have only risen in the last few months. In fact, given the coronavirus, context, many individuals from the Northeast feel that that they've been bullied. So, for instance, you find not people from the Northeast have been someone has reported that she was spat on, someone was thrown out of their homes, someone was called coronavirus. So, the link between mental health, overall, the link between mental health and marginalization is very pertinent. But unfortunately, in our field, I think many individuals who've been kind of enamored by the biological perspective have not given the due, have not concerned themselves enough with the social cultural context of mental health as much as they should have.
Mhm. So when you said that, you took an example of the recent times, the COVID-19 times, and you said that the effect on mental health of individuals is different for different kinds of people, different communities, different backgrounds.
Yeah.
What could be some
Yeah.
of the differences that are absolutely clear, which people can tell are, affecting different people differently? What could those be like?
Hmm. See, Abhi, in context of coronavirus, at least that we've kind of picked up now, there is absence of a lot of research, but still I'll give this question a try.
Mhm.
That I think by now everyone is aware that coronavirus can affect people differently. So the more vulnerable section being the elderly, those with weak immune system, and those with underlying medical condition. So yes, COVID-19 is not affecting everyone similarly, at least physically. But lately, there have also been reports that suggest that there could probably be a racial inequality in the deaths caused by COVID-19. In US, the politician Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shared some statistics where they found that there were significantly higher rates of death in neighborhoods that were predominantly Black or Latino neighborhoods. So there have been suggestions that overcrowded public housing, pollution, lack of access in healthcare in these neighborhoods could be some of the possible reasons. Now, if we come to mental health, again, like I said, that there's an absence of research, of course, right now. And in general, I think most of us are actually feeling a heightened sense of insecurity, anxiety, and hopelessness given the times that we are in. But I think we need to check our privileges also over here, because I feel that at least some of us have the luxury of not worrying about where our next meal is going to come from. So there have been reports where, interviews were taken where rickshaw pullers have said that, poverty will get to us faster than coronavirus can. So, I mean, even the whole concept of social distancing can be a privilege in itself, because given the fact that many people in our country till date live in, families living in one room, close, crowded neighborhoods, Dharavi, for example. So, can everyone in this country actually afford social distancing? That is the question. So, to answer your question, is this pandemic affecting us similarly? Physically, definitely not, and perhaps not mentally also.
Specifically talking about gender, Ritisha, how can one understand it in the context of mental health?
Right. See, there has been over representativeness of women in certain mental disorders, specifically depression. anxiety, and eating disorders.
Mhm.
And if we talk about men, there have been higher rates of alcoholism and personality disorders like antisocial personality disorders in men. So there are many explanations for this. So people who are, they are prone to taking a biological stand on this would talk about how there are genetic differences and chromosomal differences between the male and the females, which lead to these kind of sex differences in mental disorders. But I am more biased towards the social cultural explanation, because I firmly believe that personal is political and gendered experiences definitely have an important role in these sex differences. So if you go to the WHO website, there's a very interesting report on gender and mental health. And this report talks about how multiple roles, sexual abuse, gender discrimination, domestic violence, overwork, and related conditions like poverty and malnutrition definitely affect women's mental health. I mean, if we specifically talk about disorders, then 9 out of 10 people with eating disorders are women. I think all of us can attest to the fact that we've felt a lot of pressure in conforming to the global ideal of thinness, and in context, at least in South Asian context, even for that matter, fair skin color. I don't think there is a woman in Delhi who can step out of her house without checking what she's wearing, what time of the day it is, what kind of people she's going to meet, what route she's going to take. So we're constantly in a heightened sense of arousal regarding our safety. So, I mean, come to abusive relationship. There's so many women who will be trapped in extremely abusive circumstances, but they may not be financially independent to get out of these situations. And even in cases where they are financially independent, the taboo against the taboo against moving out of your house, or the taboo against calling out abuse कि आप अपना घर छोड़ के क्यों जा रहे हैं, लोग मतलब लोग क्या कहेंगे, still keeps them trapped in these horrible circumstances. I mean, if you come back to depression, symptoms of depression are what? Passivity, inferiority, low self-esteem, extreme dependence. And if you look at gendered roles, then this description of depression is more close to the feminine gender role than the masculine gender role. So it makes me kind of question: Are we um, socializing women to adopt or exhibit symptoms of depression in a way?
Mm.
And the saddest part of this all, this entire, what I've just shared with you, is that we've all normalized these experiences so much. We refuse to recognize the link between gender and mental health, patriarchy and mental health in particular. And if we find someone to be depressed, instead of examining or questioning the depressing circumstances that this individual may be in, we're likely to attribute the individual's inability to be happy, kind of a we will talk about depression being more like a character flaw, uh, at best related to neurotransmitters and hormones, which I don't deny. But a lot of us do not understand that neurotransmitters and even brain functioning can be and is related to the experiences of individuals, especially chronic cases of chronic experiences of oppression and discrimination.
Right. Itisha, also the issue of mental health and feminism pertains to men as well. However, there is a very common notion that it is meant probably only for women. Could you help us to understand how and why this perspective is important universally and it impacts all
Yeah.
genders?
I think that's a very important question that you've asked here. Well, while feminism has always faced resistance from all quarters of the society, it's like I read somewhere that it's the second F word in the English dictionary that manages to piss people off. But I think the resistance is more from men in our society who continue to believe that the feminist movement is not needed anymore. That gender no longer is a problem. And to that end, I would like to say this to all men and women and children and adults and out there, that feminism is not anti-men. It is anti-patriarchy.
Mm.
And it's very important for us to understand that patriarchy has trapped men as well as women in gender roles. So I shared some time ago that there are higher rates of alcohol use, substance use, and abuse amongst men. And you cannot negate that this has to do with the fact that there is widespread acceptance of alcohol abuse and use in men over women. And in fact, it is seen as an acceptable way of dealing with life's stressors. You know, we romanticize Kabir Singh, if you see, or Devdas, if you see, we romanticize alcohol abuse in men. Now, coming to emotions, I think it's commonly said that women are very emotional and men are not very emotional, in fact. But we tend to forget this one very important emotion, which is anger. I think one of the biggest damage that patriarchy has done to men is that it has emotionally castrated men. So the myriad of emotions that human beings can experience, patriarchy has forced men to kind of channelize it through just one emotion, which is anger and aggressive acts. So that's why you'll see, I mean, if you see around us, even something like a birthday celebration in engineering and medical colleges would be through, you know, something called birthday bumps, where you'll have a large group of guys beating up a man who's to celebrate this person's birthday. In fact, unfortunately, there was also a death reported because of this kind of a celebration. So it's no surprise that interpersonal relationships with men tend to suffer because of this emotional castration, because women are expected to do a lot more of this emotional labor because they tend to be emotionally castrated. So even if you see men who do not conform to traditional notions of masculinity, they are bullied so much. Take the example of effeminate men or gay men. So I think overall, it's high time for us to recognize that men, women, or even individuals who do not conform to the gender binaries may all be vulnerable to mental health problems as a result of the rigid gendered roles that patriarchy has given us from our birth. While structural inequalities have definitely oppressed women since ages, but if men allow themselves to experience and to feel and to reflect, they'll probably find that patriarchy is a zero-sum game for all of us.
Thank you, Vitisha, for shedding light on such a fresh perspective. I think these can definitely help those in the field or those passionate about it to realign their view about mental health in order to incorporate for a more unbiased approach.
Thank you, Sonakshi, for taking this topic up. Thank you so much.